Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm continuing in this video my series on Isaac Asimov's works, going through everything I can get my hands on by Isaac Asimov in in order of publication, chronological order of publication. And I've done his first 8 stories. I'm now moving on to number 9, which was called Strange Playfellow. Strange Playfellow was published in the September 1940 issue of Super Science Stories. Not one of the better magazines of the 1940s. It didn't make it into Astounding. If I recall correctly, Asimov did submit it to Campbell, but Campbell did reject it. And so it got published in Super Science Stories. And, well, Asimov was paid a lot less for it, but oh well. That's the breaks. It also has an alternate title of Robbie, which is what you'll see in most of the collections Asimov has published with robot stories, including I, Robot or the rest of the robots or the complete robot. You'll most likely see it titled Robbie. It is just a short story. And the really, really interesting thing about this short story is this is Asimov's first robot story, but there's no US robots and mechanical men. There's no 3 laws. There's no Susan Calvin. He hadn't come up with those yet. This was his first robot story, and probably under the influence of stories like Helen O'Loy and I, Robot, which were the first ones to show robots sympathetically instead of having them be these evil, monstrous creations that are out to destroy everything on the rampage and malfunctioning. Helen O'Loy and I, Robot by Ian O'Binder both presented robots as very human and innocent creatures. Human but not human. And Asimov follows that trend with Strange Playfellow. The basic synopsis is you've got a young girl, an 8-year-old girl, her name is Gloria, and her parents gave her a robot named Robbie to be a playmate. And she is just completely smitten with Robbie. She doesn't want to play with human kids. She doesn't want pets like dogs. She doesn't want to play other games. She just wants to do everything with Robbie. She wants to spend all of her time with Robbie. And her mother in particular is very disturbed by this and pushes at Gloria's father to get rid of Robbie. Okay. And the story proceeds from there. I don't want to spoil the rest. It's a very good story. This is very unusual for science fiction around 1940 in that it's a very sentimental story. There's nothing in it that really hits you as unexpected. Although for 1940 it probably was, but from today's perspective, it's pretty much kind of predictable. But understanding that it's 1940, understanding that this is only the 3rd time I'm aware of that anybody wrote a sympathetic story about a robot. The relationship between the girl and the robot is very well done and very touching. Some people might think it's a little sappy, but only in comparison with the rest of science fiction where we're more focused on the Robert Heinlein engineers solving problems than we are on human stories. This actually brings a very human story at a time when you didn't get a lot of that in science fiction. And this is coming from Asimov, who isn't all that well known for his characters, and it's a young girl. It's not a young boy, it's a young girl is the lead character of the story. So another example of where the people who claim that science fiction is very set, that classic science fiction is all sexist and all white male. Once again, they're wrong. This story is not. And the simplicity of the story, simplicity of the plot, I think makes this the perfect introductory science fiction story for kids. Say, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old, really young, you know, younger stuff that where you wouldn't want to be handing them Philip K. Dick to read, or um, J.G. Ballard or Harlan Ellison. This story by Asimov, I think they would understand and relate to really well, especially today where we do have a world where robots are starting to come into play, although we still don't have anything quite like Robbie. In some ways, Robbie the robot here is not as sophisticated as what we have today, but in other ways, it's more sophisticated. Very interesting. Um, and of course, anybody who loves Asimov needs to read this story. It's that simple. Yeah, you got to read Strange Playfellow. When I read this when I was young, I preferred all the other iRobot stories to Strange Playfellow. I thought Strange Playfellow, first of all, it doesn't really fit very well with the rest of iRobot. And second of all, it was a little too sappy for for me at that time in my life. But in rereading it today, I have a complete reassessment of the tale of the story, and I have to give this one a top tail. It really is very, very good for all of its simplicity, for all of its possible weaknesses. What you might perceive as weaknesses, they are actually strengths that, like I say, make this a very good juvenile story, a very good for not for a teenager, but for younger than teenager, to get them, if they want to try science fiction. It's short, easy to read, written at their level, characters that they can identify with, situations they can identify with. It's the perfect science fiction story to introduce a child to science fiction if they want to get started on science fiction. This is the place to go. And I have this story in a number of places. Like I say, it's in iRobot, which I have not with me. It's in the robot collection, which I also have, but not with me right now. I've got another omnibus Isaac Asimov book published by Octopus Books. It's in that. I don't have that with me right now. What I do have right here is the Great Science Fiction Stories Volume 2, which I just recently read. Um, Fritz Leiber's The Automatic Weapon, or The Automatic Pistol. And I also read The Dwindling Sphere, but I'm saving that for a whole Willard Hawkins video talking about all his work. I've got some more reading to do. But Strange Playfellow is also in here on page 206, and there's usually an introduction. I can't remember what they say in the introduction because I didn't read it in here this time. I read it elsewhere. I actually read it in a PDF of the original Super Science stories. Asimov says, I'm writing this introduction all by myself because I suspect Marty won't touch my stories with a 10-foot pole. In any case, my early notoriety was based on three things: my story Nightfall, my foundation stories, and my positronic robot stories. My own feeling is that the last of these, with the three laws of robotics, was most influential, actually. And I think he's right. And as it happened, I started it first. Strange Playfellow, the first of the positronic robot series, although he never uses that word positronic in the story, was written in May 1939, and John Campbell rejected it promptly. I did not manage to sell it till nearly a year later when Fred Pohl took it. Frederick Pohl was editing Super Science Stories. I had called the story Robbie, but Fred, an inveterate title changer, made it Strange Playfellow to my indignation. I restored the name to Robbie when it appeared as the lead story in I, Robot in 1950, and it has kept that title ever since. Strange Playfellow was used only in this one case in the magazine, but I keep it here to maintain historical accuracy. It is also here in its magazine version for the same reason. I polished it somewhat before it appeared in the book, but never mind. Let it be here as the 19-year-old I was wrote it. By the way, you won't find the 3 laws of robotics here. I hadn't worked them out yet. You'll get a vague reference to the first law, though, if you look for it. That is Strange Playfellow, or Robbie. Have you read the story? Leave your comments. Leave comments about Isaac Asimov in general. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come on back for a lot more Isaac Asimov. The next one coming up is going to be Half-Breeds on Venus, the sequel to the story Half-Breed, which I already covered previously. Half-Breeds on Venus will be Asimov's 10th published work. And I'll be here for it. I hope you will